بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue in our reading of the introduction of the book, Reliance of the Traveler, the English translation of Umdatus Salik. We reached up to page Roman numeral number 8, the interpretive method. Inshallah, let us begin.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, the interpretive method. The style of translating the basic text is an explanative one with interlinear commentary.
So this point, let me explain to you quickly how when one studies in the original Sunni methodology of acquiring knowledge, some may say traditional learning, which has become, a term of dispute, so we won't detail that. The way scholars have always learned historically in Islam and students. So let's say that, right? There is a way of knowledge transfer, how you acquire knowledge and how you receive knowledge. So after the writing of books, the scholars would have 3 things in their session: the scholar himself, the book, and the student. So 3: scholar, the book, the student. The scholar would usually read a book with a student in a particular field of study. So for instance, you will have a summarized book in Aqidah, which we call a metan. Right? Let me just do it all. Oh, too late now. So you have a text. That metan is a basic text in a given area of study. So the student would read that with the teacher, or if it's more than one person, sometimes the student would listen while someone else is reading to the teacher, or sometimes the teacher would read to the students. So there's multiple ways that would happen. Then, while you're studying that book, so you have the basic text in front of you, the teacher would provide a sharh, or an explanation. So the teacher would be telling you the meanings of what you're mentioning. Sometimes the teacher would have another book that is an explanation of the basic text that you're reading, right? And then the teacher would also have references from his own studies as notes, right? Which usually were on the margins of a book, around the sides of the book, which is called a hashiyah, right? So they're like marginal notes, right? Whenever you would study, you would have these elements in your study of that particular field. So our teachers used to say, whoever hasn't studied a book 3 times has never studied that book. So therefore, those 3 stages were sometime combined in one reading, right? So you would read the text, the sheikh would explain, and then he would have these notes that he would give to you, or you would refer to while the teacher is teaching. More preferably, would be done in 3 readings of the book. So sometimes you just read the text with the teacher. No explanation, maybe very little comments, clarifying words. That's about it. But not explaining the meanings in detail. Just making sure you understand what is being talked about, the material itself. Then after you do that, you would come back to the teacher, and then he would provide, after you got a firm grasp of the book and the contents and the subject, when you would come back to study that book again, he'd start adding notes, more explanations, more qualifications or exemptions from different rulings related to whatever you're talking about. And then that third time is where he would, because now you're almost at a level of teaching the text from learning with the teacher, then he's going to go into details, mentioning evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, statements of other scholars, referring you to other books to give you to research on the subject, such. This is the way you learn. And I would recommend, even though in our time, there's that's becoming rare, and not as many as, not with the internet and with, all of these things, people are not doing that as much. But I would suggest to everyone, whenever you want to learn, have this type of learning in mind, right? This type of interaction with teachers, interaction with explanations and text. Now, so this is that spirit and that methodology of learning, that interpretive method of explaining text. The translator wanted to capture all that in a book form for a person who was not exposed to that, right? There are some elements that is just not possible to capture, like the spirit of the classes and, that relationship between student teacher. But the idea was to capture that method of Islamic learning. Yes.
The reason for commentary, briefly, is that this book, like others in Islamic law, is less the achievement of a particular author than the shared effort of a whole school of research and interpretation in explaining rules of divine origin. The cooperative nature of this effort may be seen in the multi-layered character of its text, whose primary authors often merely state the ruling of an act, lawful or unlawful, leaving matters of definition, conditions, and scriptural evidence for the commentator to supply, who in turn leaves important details for both writers of marginal notes and for living sheikhs to definitively interpret when teaching the work to their students.
And here, an important point to keep in mind, as the translator is mentioning, that whenever you're studying a field of Islamic study, that field is Roman numeral number 8, Khalil, in the introduction, Roman numeral 8. The knowledge that you're studying is a combination of scholarly input, not just one teacher. So, for instance, we're studying about Shafi'i fiqh. Shafi'i fiqh is not just the opinions or the statement or the contribution of Imam Shafi'i. Rather, there are hundreds of scholars who contributed to the school, to the text of the school, to explaining the information related to the school, providing hadith evidence, providing references from the Arabic language. Some people just specialize in different aspects of the knowledge. So when the scholars, they write books, they're combining all of that effort. Now,
The sheikhs form a second key resource of textual commentary, a spoken one parallel to the written, and in previous centuries of traditional Islamic learning, it was well known that no student could dispense with it. Living teachers were and are needed to explain terminological difficulties, eliminate ambiguities, and correct copyist mistakes. The present translator was no exception to the need for instructors, but went to sheikhs to learn, studying with them during the course of preparing the translation, asking and listening to their explanations of matters of sacred law, many of which are recorded below.
here, this aspect of living teachers is beautifully expressed in the poem that it was mentioned that a man may think that books are of some use to men of learning in gaining facts. The ignoramus cannot know that therein are mysteries which daze the most astute. If you should pursue the sciences but lack a shake, you'll stray from the straight path and track, and things will be so much confused for you that you'll be lost and know not what to do. Subhanallah. Beautifully expressed in those lines of poetry. That people think that learned people rely solely on books, but really those books, they have some things in them that require expertise. So if you try to learn the science of Islam without having reference to those people who are experts in that field, you'll get confused and you'll start being way away from the mark in what you intended to acquire in terms of knowledge. So that's what they said, things will be so much confused for you that you'll be lost and know not what to do. And as some of the great scholars said, whoever doesn't have a teacher, when we say sheikh, we mean by that someone who guides you along your studies, then his teacher will be the devil. Because books don't talk. Books don't tell you this is a printing error. Books don't tell you, no, you need this extra information to understand this properly. Books don't tell you this was added, the original author never did it. The books don't tell you that, you know, this is abrogated by this. So books have limits. That's why you need living teachers to explain. Now,
The entire book's Arabic text have been reviewed separately with each of the scholars, Sheikh Abdul Wakil Durubi and Sheikh Nu Ali Salman.
and both of those were top scholars in knowledge, one in Syria and one in Jordan.
Both ably represent the tradition, links in an unbroken succession of masters leading back to the founder of the school himself. Sheikh Abdul Wakil acquired his Shafi jurisprudence in the course of 18 years of instruction with his own teacher, Ibrahim al-Ghazi, before becoming Imam of the Darwishiyah in Damascus.
I want you to think about that. And I was thinking about something today earlier. A young man was criticizing one of the classical great scholars. It was very disrespectful. Forget the disrespect. But, and we should watch ourselves with this, that, listen, youngster, you haven't even spent not even 5 years of serious study. And you're correcting someone who was a chief justice in a country in Islamic law, when scholars in his time were master memorizers of hadith. That in his time, which was the 8th century, if you didn't memorize 100,000 hadith, no one would even talk to you about Islamic knowledge in terms of giving you consideration. And you don't even memorize one book of hadith, and you're criticizing this chief Islamic judge. No respect, right? And here he's talking about Sheikh Abdul Wakil, who studied 18 years just in one science of acquiring knowledge. You know, I had this in mind that if we keep it up, the kindergartners are going to challenge the professors at Harvard in a debate. And if you think what that would look like, the kindergartners are going to challenge the professors at Harvard in a debate. The kindergartners debate team. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So when you think of 18 years just in one field of study, despite other things he's learning, 18 years, that'll give you an idea of what is needed to be considered authoritative in a subject. Now,
While Sheikh Nuh spent a similar number of years reading and studying the law with various sheikhs before his appointment as Mufti in Jordan.
the
Few
Mufti here, Mufti of Jordan, so he was Mufti over the military and then Mufti over the whole country, rahimahullah ta'ala. One of my teachers related, who studied with Sheikh Nuh Ali Salman, he related a story to me. And actually, after he related my story, I actually experienced it in real life. He said that they sent a number of graduates from the university who all had doctorate degrees in Islamic law. Listen to this. He said they went to Sheikh Nur Ali Salman so they can be admitted as judges. When he examined them, not one of them knew the basic obligations of prayer. And they had doctorate degrees. And for me, I just couldn't imagine that. Even when the sheikh said it to me, I was like, that's strange, right? Until later, I met one of those PhDs, and I realized that they never studied the traditional way. So they just skipped over a lot of things. So what was really important for someone who is traveling their way to Allah and not for the dunya, that they wouldn't miss. But if you're training for someone just for a worldly position, you might not emphasize that salat's for the kids. He needs to give rulings. But salat is the most important aspect of your acts of worship. And therefore, you need to know it well. And it shouldn't be just brushed over. And I understood what the sheikh was telling me about what happened to Sheikh Nuh. Because in his days of studying, that was impossible. That a student would be a real student and not know these basic things. The student would have studied this book and studied this book, then studied this book, then studied that book, before he even got to anything talking about being a judge or being a legal authority. So the time in this classical way of studying is extremely important, right? So that as we learn, certain things are just like drinking the water. We studied this, we studied this, we studied this. In this subject, we studied this, this, this. In this subject, we studied this, 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 right? That's the traditional way of learning. So that by the time you add advanced studies, you've already studied at minimum at least 3 texts in each science with a teacher. Now,
few Western vocations require as much specialized learning. If it be objected that their comments are not part of the original text or even intrusive, the reply is that such teachings is recommended by long Islamic tradition with good reason, as may be seen by readers who compare the clarity, for example, of the present works section, of a state division, L4 to L10, with any English translation of comparable sections from other works. Moreover, care has been taken throughout the volume to assign each statement to the person who said it. Finally, close contact with these scholars as Muslims leaves one with a firm impression of God-fearingness, the first condition of real knowledge and its most important fruit.
So 2 points here at this end section. When you learn in this format, being accurate in relating and conveying the knowledge from whom, in which book, where is it mentioned, connected to what, is extremely important, right? And that's where we've been doing already in our reading, referring to points, referring to the biographical section, referring to the work cited, knowing what scholars said what were the ranks of the different scholars in different fields, and who are references and who are not references. When you study in that type of environment, that becomes one of the blessings of those sessions, that you are aware of what you're talking about, and you know from where knowledge came from. The other point, which is really, I believe, the most important point, when you study with teachers and you're in their company and you live with them and you get a sense of what is important, and you feel Islamic living. And I repeat, I remind myself often of learning in schools where that wasn't really the focus of guiding you to Allah, compared to studying with teachers whose concern was not just what you learn, but how you implement what you learn, right? I don't want you to just learn knowledge. I want you to travel to Allah and make it safe to the hereafter. And the approaches are not necessarily the same, right? And that latter approach of actually trying to help you be a good Muslim, which is all of the knowledge is about, and to be a good servant of Allah is like night and day. Now,
Some points about the book. Ahmed ibn Naqib al-Misri, died 769-1368, is the author of the basic text, Umdat al-Salik wa Uddat al-Nasik, The Reliance of the Traveler and the Tools of the Worshipper, Y89, which is voweled in the Arabic. Not a single omission has been made from it, though rulings about matters now rare or non-existent have been left untranslated, unless interesting for some other reason. Parts untranslated are enclosed in brackets.
so here, the original text that is used for this book is the book Umdatu Salik wa Uddatu Nasik. I thought I had a smaller one here. This one is a commentary, but this is a commentary. The original book Umdatu Salik. Oh, here one. It's not a commentary. So it's a much smaller book in Arabic. This is the actual basic text, and it is a famous book in Shafi'i jurisprudence, in the Shafi'i school of law. So that is the basic text of the book. But the fiqh, so it only deals with fiqh from all the chapters. It's a major work that covers all of the chapters of Islamic jurisprudence, right? From acts of worship, from marriage and divorce, buying and selling, rulership, appointing judges, rulings related to punishments and all of that. That's al-fiqh. So it goes more than just ibadat, just more than acts of worship. Now,
Umar Barakat, died after 1307-1890, wrote the text commentary, Faidul Ilahil Malik fi Halal Faz, Umdat al-Salik wa Uddat al-Nasik, the outpouring of the sovereign divinity and interpretation of the words of The Reliance of the Traveler and Tools of the Worshipper, Y27.
This is a 2-volume commentary. It was republished just recently. I think that is like 4 volumes. 4 volumes in a much better publishing. 4-volume edition. There are several now good commentaries on the book. And as we go further in studying, then when we move to the issues of al-fiqh, when we study, we'll refer to all of these commentaries. Even this one by Sheikh Umar Barakat and other ones who have different things that are very beneficial. Now,
from which excerpts have been selected and introduced into the basic text by the translator. These are parenthesized in the Arabic and unvoweled, and distinguished in the English by parentheses and the capital letter O. Similarly, the comments of Sheikh Nu al-Salman.
We should remember, we should memorize these letters and who they identify. Because when you're learning the book, you have all these references, right? So we'll be studying, and the Sheikh will say, go look into Faidul Ilah al-Malik, right? Go look into that. Go look into the commentary of so-and-so, or go look in this commentary. So we would actually have books that we're looking for. But to replace that, because you don't have the living teacher, he's going to give you these letters to identify the sheikh in the book. And it's our job that whenever we're reading, to know, okay, this O stands for Sheikh Umar Barakat in his book, Faidul Ilah al-Malik, right? Fi Hali Al-Fadh Umdat Salik, right? So you would refer to that book or other commentaries. And whenever we're going to refer to a book, it'll be introduced by that and close in the works cited section with where you can find it, what number in there, in book Y.
Similarly, the comments of Sheikh Nu al-Salman are parenthesized in both languages, in the Arabic unvoweled and introduced by the letter Ha, and in the English by the letter N. The comments of Sheikh Abdul Wakil Durubi are presented in the same way, but marked in the English with the capital letter A, and in the Arabic where given by the letter Ain.
Here, so what you have is you got the basic text, you got the commentary, right, from Umar Barakat in his book, and then you got these marginal notes that would like make up sort of like a hashia from their explanations. If you wrote them down, they would be on the side of the book, written by Sheikh, what would be the comments of Sheikh Abdul Wakil Durubi or Sheikh Nur Ali Salman. So you would get that in this book, you sort of got that whole combination. So even though they were living sheikhs that he studied with, but those notes that he put would serve for that purpose. Now,
Notes from the sheikhs that are not given in Arabic text are from discussions, often partly in colloquial Arabic, recorded at the time in English alone, whose precise classical Arabic wording the translator did not try to reconstruct, though they have been well understood, and the English, Allah Ta'ala willing, adequately conveys their meaning. The
so that's
translators
when you're studying with teachers, sometimes because they don't always, when you study with teachers, stick to the subject. So they may be talking about one thing and then drift off 3 or 4 classes about something else based on something that was mentioned but not directly related. So you would catch a lot of extra details in your study that they weren't found in books necessarily. They were from the conversation that you had with the teacher.
The translator's own remarks are parenthesized and introduced by a lowercase n in the English and by the letter ta if given in Arabic. Other supplementary texts begin with the author's name at the first of the quote and finish with the source's title, volume, and page number at the end of it, with the addition in the English of the work's reference number from the present volume's bibliographical section, Book Y. All works cited about Islamic faith or practice are by Muslim authors. Biographical information on those quoted or mentioned throughout the present work is given in Book X, where they are listed alphabetically, first name first.
And for us, in our studying in any work that we're doing, I would like most of us to have a mastery of Book X, especially in our time. Like Book X, which is the biographical notes, is extremely important, right? And knowing authoritative figures in Islamic history, right? To know our scholars. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets and they inherit knowledge, right? So one of the things that will help you in conforming to the way of the Muslim nation, the majority of the Muslim nation, right, is to know the learned people in our nation and about them, you'll get several things. You'll get to see how these scholars were not only people of knowledge, but people of piety and people of practice, right? And uh, it will be a great help. Not only that, you start to know the connection from us back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that serves many of those purposes. So I encourage all of you. Sometimes you read, just read the biography section. Just read it. Just read the names and benefit. Make dua for the author. I mean, for the scholars mentioning them. Most of them have passed. And after a while, you're going to really appreciate the value of this book. Just if that section alone is worth the whole value of the book. I didn't even kind of put the price of the book. Just that section alone is worth the cost of the book. Just book X, right, is worth it. Now, go ahead.
The rulings of the text have been numbered both to increase the work's accessibility to users of the tables of contents and to facilitate cross-reference, since the definition and range of many important terms are governed by conditions and stipulations classical authors typically mention but once. Their students mastering such definitional points by prodigious memories for which a system of cross-reference is, in its own times, perhaps the only effective substitute.
Right here, most of the time when people study under teachers, they memorize a basic text that gives them the foundation, right, to build upon. So they have a basic book that's memorized. So when the teachers are giving them extra points, they can always refer to what they memorize to put everything in its proper place, right? So the purpose of memorize the method of memorization was highly emphasized in classical Islamic circles, and still is. That certain books you just should be memorized. You should know that by heart, because that provides you with a foundation for studying more advanced aspects of that science. Now,
within the rulings themselves, columns of necessary conditions or intervals, meaning that all of them must be present for the ruling to hold true, are itemized by letters A, B, C, etc. An example is the condition for the validity of the prayer, which must all be met for the prayer to be valid. Columns of examples or instances of a ruling's applicability are itemized by numbers 1, 2, 3, etc., indicating that not all need exist, but any one of them suffices to apply the ruling, such as the things which invalidate fasting, the existence of any of which invalidates it.
So pay attention to that in our text when they're using between a thing that is a condition and the things that sometimes are invalidators, right? And things that are requisites, because through that, you're going to know what must be met for the act to begin in a valid manner, what must be maintained during the act once it's begun, and what things invalidate the act. Now,
editing the text. The editorial preferences of the Chicago Manual of Style have generally been followed in preparing the text of the present volume, though by the nature of their special challenges, the manner of citing the text differs from the manual's recommendations for handling quotations in the following ways. Number 1. The old Arabic texts were free of need for any punctuation because of the language's syntactic precision and were originally written without it, while it was introduced in a somewhat haphazard manner in comparatively recent times, attested to by the books printed within the last 100 years in the Arab world, which show wide discrepancies in both the extent to which punctuation is used and in the meaning of such devices as quotation marks, commas, semicolons, parentheses, brackets, and the rest. In editing the Arabic of the present volume, the translator.
one of the things that we enjoy even now, when you're reading the modern books, they're much more enjoyable because of punctuation and spacing and all that. But the older books in Arabic, they're very, very taxing on the eyes, but they're much more precise. you know, and much more reliable. But you have to have a little skill in reading because sometimes it's difficult to follow. Now, go ahead.
In editing the Arabic of the present volume, the translator has standardized its punctuation according to the practice of most Arab publishers in the 1980s, with the exception of the use of parentheses and brackets, which Arab writers often use for emphasis, while the translator has
I'll give you an example. You can see, just to look at it, this is like the old books, right? And you could just look at the print and see how it is written. Much a little more difficult than reading the new books like this. Much clearer, much more organized. So you get good order, but sometimes those older books, those scholars would check them better. They were more, reliable. So we would sometimes have, when we read with our teachers, that we would have the older edition and the new edition. The new edition for reading, the older edition for verifying.
while the translator has employed them as in English for the purpose of interlinear commentary and indicating untranslated passages as described above. Number 2. The Arabic chapter and section titles extant in the original text have been shortened to the name of the topic alone. For example, from Bab al-Hiba, chapter of gift giving, to al-Hiba, gift giving, and so forth. Passages introducing a new topic that is not separately distinguished in the original Arabic or merely distinguished by the word fasl, section, have been separated into sections and given English titles, such as Section N6, doubts about the fact of having divorced, and subsection titles have been added where expedient, such as before J17.9, hunting. The reason for this retitling and regrouping was to improve the work's accessibility to English-speaking users, to whom an effective reference tool is worth more than a well-kept antique. The Arabic titles of such,
Depending who wants that antique, mashallah.
the Arabic titles of such sections were supplied by Sheikh Nuh after their English titles had been written, according to the expressions he felt best summarized the section's contents, not by way of translating the English titles, so there is not always a strict correspondence between the titles of the two languages. Hunting, for example, became the rulings of hunting, Ahkam al-Sayd, in Arabic, and so forth. As for major regroupings, books D through O of the present volume correspond to the books of Umdat al-Salik, while only three exceptions, Book D, the author's introduction, the sections of Book L on bequest, L 1 through 3, which have been moved from there which had been moved there from Book K, Trade, and the Book of Dowry, Kitab el Sadak, originally from M8 to N12, from which Book N, Divorce, had been separated, since it seemed fitter to include dowry, wife support, and so forth under the rubric of marriage, and place matters connected with divorce in a separate book. Number 3.
What we're going to do in the future, as we finish Sulam al-Tawfiq, we're going to go in a sequence of Shafi'i fiqh books. So we're going to read one book, then we're going to go to another book, right? In an order up to Umdat al-Salik, because there are at least 3 books that we must read before we read Umdat al-Salik that are extremely important. So it makes it easier to study Umdat al-Salik. So we're going to read like 3 books of smaller books in fiqh and work our way up to Umdat al-Salik, to Reliance of the Traveler. But we will always, while we're studying other things, use Reliance of the Traveler as reference points, or as a reference for points that we discuss in the other books. Now,
As number 3, as previously mentioned, parts of the Arabic left untranslated into English are distinguished in the Arabic alone by square brackets. For the sake of fluency and readability, such untranslated portions are not marked by ellipsis points, parentheses, in the English, as the existence of the contents of the ellipsis in the parallel column of Arabic was felt to suffice in their stead. The occasional use of ellipsis points in the English has been confined to indicating editorial omissions in the Arabic, and where such an ellipse is not indicated in the English, the ellipsis points appear in brackets in the facing column of Arabic alone. Number 4. In the course of editing the commentary and some of the supplementary material of the present volume, though not the basic text, the sequence of some passages has occasionally been altered for the sake of coherence of argumentation, the need for which would not be lost on anyone familiar with medieval Arabic text, whose authors sometimes seem to have not re-edited their work with a view towards logical sequencing or eliminating digressions. Passages in which this has been done have been reviewed and checked by both Sheikh Abdul Wakil and Sheikh Noor, like the other texts of the present work, and are indicated at the end of their Arabic text by the words biqadim wa takhir, put ahead and behind,
بالتقديم والتأخير.
bitaqdim wa takhir, put ahead and behind, and is done by Muslim scholars when a passage is quoted in this way.
So, in other words, you'll have, if you're quoting from a book, that the original book has a bunch of things, but the author will take portions of the book and organize them to make the argument flowing, right? So when he quotes like that, he'll say, I took from this book, bit taqdim wa ta'khir, right? By putting some forward and taking some from different places. So if you go to the original book, you won't think it's going to be in the order that you read it in the quote.
Other details. As an aid to non-Arabic speakers, transliteration sections W1 has been added to help people pronounce the supplications, dua, and invocations, dhikr, mentioned in the course of the book, with the observation that it is best to also tape record a native speaker of Arabic reading the texts so as to master them by imitating the tape, and to facilitate this there is an index of the relevant Arabic text at W2. The untranslatability of the Holy Quran is fully acknowledged by the translator, whose
Can
only
we keep
effort.
that in mind? The untranslatability of the Quran. The Quran is in Arabic language. Anything that we say other than the Arabic language is not the Quran. It is an attempt of the translator to convey the meanings that are contained in the Quran in that respective language. By necessity, there's going to be some loss in understanding from language to language. So whenever one says that Allah said, one should be careful to realize that what Allah said, what Sayyid Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, what Prophet Muhammad said was in Arabic. And whatever we convey in another language is an attempt at conveying the meaning. That's it. And that's why literal translations sometimes can be dangerous, because they will lose the meaning that is understood in the Arabic language. I remember one of the scholars mentioning, when he was explaining about this concept, he said, there are certain things just being an Arab, you're going to know. Just from being an Arabic speaker, you already know what this is meant. And it is someone who's not familiar with the language of the Arabs are going to miss certain points. And that's similar to us. If you come in certain parts of the country, the people from that area, they have a way of speaking that they understand. And maybe someone that's not from that area, even though they speak English, may not fully grasp some of the concepts from those people. But when we're talking about a whole language, it is, and it's different language, it's even more so. Now,
The untranslatability of the Holy Quran is fully acknowledged by the translator, whose only effort where it is quoted in the present volume has been to explain the significance of its verses, giving a map, as it were, to the wide lands of its magnificent Arabic. The English by no means purports to be or to imitate the word of Allah Ta'ala Most High.
and we should take that serious. Even though we speak English, you know, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is revelation. Out of manners and behaviors with the Quran and with the words of the Prophet ﷺ, we should not be arrogant and negate the fact that we're going to be missing some things without the language, right? And when we convey in the language, understand that there's the possibility of loss of meaning.
It is related that Imam Shafi, Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, rahimahullah, rechecked his masterpiece on legal principles, Ar-Risala, 40 times before he finally said, Allah Ta'ala has refused to give divine protection from error, Isma, to anyone besides his prophets. That
Ar-Risala of Imam Shafi is considered the foundational book in Usul al-Fiqh, in the fundamentals of Islamic jurisprudence. It was the first well-known book written that was accepted across the Muslim lands in this subject. And basically all of the books in Usul al-Fiqh, in the science of foundation of fiqh, are built up off of his book.
The matter is, as he said, and one can only strive one's utmost for accuracy and ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive one's mistakes and oversights. If readers benefit from these pages, perhaps they will pray for those who had a hand in them and thank Allah Ta'ala Most High, who attributes all that exists to himself by saying, "This is Allah Ta'ala's creation, so show me what those besides him have created." Quran Surah 31, Ayah 11. May Allah Ta'ala Most High bless his beloved Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and give him peace, and his folk and his companions one and all.
Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, with that, we've completed the introduction of the Reliance. I think all of those notes are very important, and we're going to try to. I wanted to go to Al-Adhkar. I'm going to take counsel with the reader, and later on we'll get back with you. Should we read these first 3 introductory sections, which I think are very beneficial, and not go into the book, but go into these things, and then go to Kitab al-Adhkar that we were planning on reading in English. So inshallah, before next week, we'll make a decision on that, and inshallah, we can benefit each other. It was one statement or question. Let me look at it before we leave off, inshallah. Where did it go? Oh, that wasn't a question. Inshallah, Mary, may Allah make it easy. Make it easy for you. Inshallah, as you keep going, you'll benefit. All we're doing is laying out a map. Once you get the map of studying, you can study with any teacher, and you already know the style of teaching, what book should be taught, and then you're just sitting with the teacher to make sure you're understanding right. Look at these classes as in these sessions that we do and these books that we read is laying your foundation. Even though it may seem a little bit sometimes advanced, really it's not. It's really basic Islamic studies. It's just in the traditional way that we're not used to, right? But alhamdulillah, it's a curriculum. We learn that like when we went to school. We go first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, so forth and so on. Same process, inshallah, but just in Islamic studies. May Allah make it easy. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Barakallahu fikum. Please make dua for our reader, and her family, uh, that Allah gives them tawfiq for all of their help and support. بسير الأسرار الفاتحة. All these videos and all of the classes are found on our Facebook page and on YouTube at Masjid Muhammad of Atlantic City YouTube channel. The page, you'll find all of these videos there. It takes a second to upload, but they're all there. You can find them, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.